27 July 1950. Gaukornigshofen, Lower Franconia. A farmer named Karl writes, 1939, rural Germany. I get a farm for half its worth. In 1950, I must give it back for nothing. The soil keeps no record of owners. It is a dangerous sentence in his village. People here prefer shorter memories. They prefer prices and weather and silage. His line cuts through that. It is a thesis. It is also an account ledger. 1939. The Reich is still in its long parade. Würzburg's synagogue has been burned and demolished. Its stone is being recycled into roads. The bureaucratic word is Aryanization. The practice is simple. Jewish farms are seized by trustees, sold under pressure. Valuations are made not by market, but by the arithmetic of exclusion. Good land changes hands at half value, sometimes less. The mathematics of it is written in stiff black type. In the Chrysamt file later recovered, an entry reads, 12 April 1939. Transfer of agricultural property, owner Stern Mendel. Purchaser S. Karl, born 1911. Appointed trustee present. Price agreed, 46,000 RM. Mortgage by Raiffeisenkasse Ochsenfurt, 22,000 RM. An agency stamp in purple ink. A signature in quick slanted hand. It is short. It is complete. Karl is 28. He is not a man of speeches. He is a man of yields. He has been a workman on another man's land. He has watched the Sternelhof from the lane, plaster walls, a stone barn, 10 hectares of good loam, irrigation ditches dug by hands older than his. He knows the slope. He knows the grain. There drinks just enough. He knows the family that lives behind those doors, Mendel Stern, a tough-faced man with cracked thumbs, his wife Bertha, a son 2 years younger than Karl named Leo, who can coax a balky cow up a ramp with a hand behind its ear. He has sold eggs to them. He has borrowed a scythe. He has once sat at their table. The Reich makes it so Karl can buy what he could not have bought. The Reich makes it so Karl can have bought. There is a Treuhänder, a trustee in a brown suit who says, the valuation has been performed according to guidelines. That means the price is what the state wants it to be. It is an arithmetic of pressure that feels like market only to those who need to feel absolved. Karl signs. He takes the keys from the trustee, not from Mendel, who is not allowed to be seller. He tells himself he did not make the rules. He tells himself he is not a thief. He tells himself the soil is indifferent. A neighbor, a man who always resented Jews and now can say so, says, the Sterns never truly belonged here. You can hear the mathematics of belonging in that line. Sum of births on this land equals 0 if you carry Jewish to the right side of the equation and cross it out. Autumn, 1939. The war starts and goes well. The cows give milk. The Reichsnahstand sets quotas. Karl is summoned twice by the Ortsbauernführer to talk about yields. He can still avoid party membership. He can still be a farmer without a brown shirt. He sends his brother to the war with a loaf of bread and a kiss on the head. He writes letters asking about Minsk, about snow. The Sterns are moved. The files say resettled. The town knows that word is an alias. In the winter of 1941, a cart takes Bertha and Mendel to the station in Würzburg. A neighbor watches that procession from behind a curtain. He will later tell an interviewer that there was nothing to be done. He will also later dream of that cart on nights when his son coughs and he cannot sleep. The Sternelhof becomes the S-Farm. The sign over the gate is changed using the back of a chisel and a steady hand. Karl drills new holes and bolts the plank. He does not throw the old sign away. He stacks it in the shed behind the rake and the plough blades. He tells himself it is just a board. He tells himself boards are for building. 1945. March. Würzburg burns for 20 minutes and then glows for hours. 20 minutes of bombs, that is the arithmetic of an air raid. A lifetime of dust calculated out of planes in precise times and coordinates. The aerial photographs in Allied intelligence summaries show the squares as dark wounds. The Trümmerfrauen, women in scarves, begin their work in April. They form chains of bricks like prayer beads, mending a city one sunburnt knuckle at a time. They are recorded by an American Signal Corps camera, the stoop, the heave, the twist of a body-lifting stone. In April, the 12th U.S. Armored Division rolls through Oxenfurt. An officer's report says, resistance negligible. Bridges prepared for demolition but secured intact. Population subdued. The population is subdued by arithmetic. Curfew, 2,000 Reinhundred. Bread rations, 2,000 grams per day. Meat twice a week if the supply truck is not delayed. Cigarettes become currency. 1 egg equals 2 cigarettes, sometimes 3. A pair of shoes equals 2 cartons. The mathematics of hunger is tactile. You can count it in ribs, in breath that fogs in cold kitchens. Karl is not arrested. He has no file as a party official. He has paid dues to the Reichenstein because everyone has. He has nodded at meetings but has seldom spoken. This is luck. This is structure. This is the system's indifference to whispers and to fists so long as the milk quota is met. American military government prints instructions in German and English. The poster reads, Denazification. All persons must complete Fragebogen. It is a questionnaire with 131 questions. The questions are dry and bureaucratic and electric wire all at once. Were you ever a member of the NSDAP? Did you ever serve in SA, SS, NSKK? List all activities and offices. The questions have boxes. The answers feel like a chess game against paperwork. Karl sits at his kitchen table with a pencil so short he holds it like a child. He lists himself as Mitläufer. He writes that he attended rallies once or twice. He writes that he never joined SA. He writes that he took over a farm in 1939 via legal purchase. He does not write the line he will write in 1950. He does not say, half its worth. He writes, agreed price. The Americans register his answers. In an Allied intelligence summary for April 1946, the paragraph on denazification reads like a weather report for a slow storm. Processing of denazification questionnaires continues. Approximately 3.6 million returned, with a backlog in Spruchkammern. Initial classifications indicate overwhelming majority as Mitläufer or entlastet. The mathematics of guilt is an exercise in categories set by people in uniforms who need to rebuild something functional. The categories are 5. The columns are tallied. Major offenders, a sliver. Offenders, a sliver. Lesser offenders, a sliver. Lesser offenders, a wider band. Followers, the bulk. Exonerated, a significant residue. In the end, the arithmetic is this. Those who lined up papers for deportations are often reclassified as administrative. Those who shouted and threw stones in November 1938 now carry rubble out of basements with raw palms. Those who grew food stumble into the new order with mild penalties, because people must eat. 1950 is years away. The present is 1945-46. The hunger winter. Coal can't be found. The Main freezes at the edges. The Hof empties of fuel. Karl takes down a plank of the old sign and burns it in the tiled stove. The cracker of old paint releases into smoke. He tells himself, boards are for burning when they are no longer for building. He does not show anyone this thought. He watches his wife, Lisa, hold her hands out to the warmth and sees how blue her knuckles are. He trades butter for coal in Oxenfurt, where a black marketeer in a long coat counts out pieces like chips. The arithmetic of warmth is a straight exchange. 2 pounds of butter buys 3 buckets of coal. He is a man doing mathematics without pencil. The forced labourers who had worked in town returned to camps. One of them, a Ukrainian named Sasha, had worked on Karl's threshing floor in 1944. He was requisitioned by the Ortsbauernführer and given to Karl for harvest. He had been thin and quiet. Karl had told him to drink milk when no one watched. In May 1945, Sasha comes to the yard and stares at the stone of the barn, as if to fix it in memory. He picks up a handful of dirt. He says, "I go." Karl says, "Go." That is the entire conversation. It is enough. It is also less than needed. The memory will sit in Karl's chest as a lump. He will not tell anyone about it. He will not tell anyone about it. He will not tell an interviewer in 1973, because no one will ask him. The displaced persons move out of the barracks and into camps. Zeilsheim, near Frankfurt, is filled with Jews speaking Yiddish and Polish, with Americans promising food and medicine. Wildflecken up in the Rhone is full of Poles and some non-repatriable. An occupation report notes, DPs in this area have higher ration cards. German civilian animosity rising. The mathematics of resentment is always relative. If the man in the next room eats meat on a Thursday while your ration card shows 0, you invent a story for why he has meat that absolves you of noticing his tattooed numbers, locals and newcomers. The expellees arrive in 1946 from Silesia, from the Sudetenland, from East Prussia, driven west by decrees and by armies. They pile out of trains at Würzburg Hauptbahnhof with 1 trunk per family and a piece of paper stamped by a county office, zugewiesen. Assigned. The Landrat issues a circular, Wohnraum ist aufzuteilen. Living space is to be divided. The math is not kind. 7 rooms become 4 for the old family and 3 for the new. Farmers must billet 2 families in the loft. Karl learns the exact measurement of his attic, 7.3 meters by 4.8 meters. 2 pallets can fit side by side with a meter in between. He moves sacks of barley to the barn and watches a woman from Oppeln fold her linens over a hedge to air them in the cold light. She tells him, "We are people from Silesia." He nods. He does not say, "I took over a farm for half its worth." He says, "There is the pump. They share soup. The school is doubling up classes." The teacher, who wore a brown pin on his lapel and taught Rassenkunde in 1938, teaches arithmetic and handwriting in 1946. He tells the children to write with their arms, not just their fingers. He teaches them the new words, Demokratie, Bundestag, Verfassung. He teaches them that the war was the fault of criminals at the top. The school books are new, printed on rough paper, and they say the Nazis were a tyranny. They say nothing about people like their fathers. They have a list of dates. They do not have the names of the people in their village who made lists of Jews in 1938. Spruchkammer, Würzburg. 19 November 1947. Karl appears before a panel. It is a cramped room in a damaged building patched with timber. The file is labeled Spruchkammerakties K. The presiding man is a school inspector in civilian life, a teacher of Latin before 1933. He now asks, "Were you a member of the NSDAP?" Karl says no. What organizations? He lists the Reichsnährstand. He lists the DAF. What positions? He lists none. How did you acquire your property? He says, legal purchase, valuation by authority. The panel looks at the paper. It reads like a ledger. It does not read like a loss. The categories are applied. The verdict, Mitlöfer. He is assigned a fine, 20 Reichsmark, later converted. The fine is paid in kind, a load of potatoes to the county. Allied military government is tired. Officials write in Allied reports in late 1947. The need for German administrative continuity outweighs the desire for thorough purgation. The mathematics of order is tired arithmetic. Keep the water running, keep the schools open, keep the police on the street, even if the policeman wore a uniform last year that disqualifies him this year in theory. Stability is a number that outruns betrayal in the short term. The DP camp at Zeilsheim in 1947 has a theatre group and a newspaper. They stage a play about a tailor who survives by telling the truth only at the wrong moments. The American soldier who writes about it in a report uses the word resilience. A German reader in 1947 uses the word fresh, cheeky. In Gaukönigshofen, the DPs are a rumor, a note in a grocery list, cannot get eggs because of deliveries to DPs. In Karl's private arithmetic, they represent a subtraction from his own hunger, not an addition to the arithmetic of someone else's survival. The winter 1946-47 does not end until April. The potatoes rot in some cellars. Official rations drop to under 1,000 calories depending on the town. People eat turnips until they cannot swallow the smell. The black market is the second economy. The cigarette is sovereign. A care package arrives for the village pastor in May 1947 from a cousin in Milwaukee. He gives out chocolate squares to children. Karl watches his son unwrap one and bite. He watches his son's eyes widen in shock at sugar. He knows that these are the moments around which grateful narratives will be built later and around which resentments will congeal. The arithmetic of a gift is that it creates both thanks and an obligation. Currency reform, 20. June 1948. Overnight, the Reichsmark becomes D-Mark 10 RM to 1 DM for cash, different for savings, with exceptions that feed rumor and envy. The morning after, shop windows fill. Lamps that had been under counters are put on shelves, socks in sizes, coffee that smells like coffee. The black market shrivels. The mathematics of trust is this: people open their drawers and bring out goods only when the money can hold its value past Saturday. Karl holds 2 new notes in his hand and feels a future that tastes like bread. He drives his wagon to Oxenfurt and orders his first new plough since 1939. He pays half in cash, half in eggs, and a handshake. The salesman, who lost a son in Stalingrad, wraps the plough handles in paper. Marshall Plan cranes arrive at the port of Bremerhaven and their contents move south. Jerrycans of oil, rolls of wire, tractors with names in English. In the newspapers, a simple drawing, a hand shaking another hand over a sack labeled ERP. The farmer in the drawbar advertisement is smiling with all his teeth. The arithmetic of aid is not mystical, it is freight and schedules and risk management and the logistics of not stealing too much in transit. It is also a decision at the top: rebuild Germany so it will not be a crater down which Europe falls again. The Wirtschaftswunder has not yet got its name in 1948, but the air changes as if pressure has been adjusted. The town shoe shop opens 3 days a week and then 5. The line in the butcher's moves faster. Karl's son grows out of his sandals in one summer. The county office begins to issue building permits again. The sound of hammers returns to afternoons. It is the arithmetic of optimism, future-oriented conversation, installment plans, an expectation that one can lay brick and, by winter, there will still be money to buy coal. The other arithmetic continues under the floorboards. Allied Military Government Law, Number 59, Restitution of Identifiable Property. November 1947 in the U.S. Zone. The law is short and explicit. Property taken from victims of Nazi oppression shall be restored, irrespective of whether the property has been confiscated or transferred by so-called Aryanization. The law ignores receipt stamps. It pays attention to how the world actually changed hands. In 1949, the new Land Restitution Office in Würzburg, in a building with a patched roof, begins to process claims. The file clerk is 22 and fast with carbon paper. She brings the Stern case file upstairs in June 1949. The label is handwritten, WGA Würzburg, Acte 4987 S. Stern. This is how contact with victims actually arrives for a man like Carl, not in a conversation, not at a fence, not in the market square, but in a letterhead. A lawyer in New York writes on behalf of Ruth Stern, the daughter, now a seamstress in Queens. She writes that her parents were deported from Würzburg in March 1942. She writes that she saw them last on a platform under the shadow of a station clock that read 11,017. She writes that she has their marriage paper and the deed. She writes that she does not want to live in Gorkonigshofen. She writes that she wants the farm back anyway. Not to come back, to make the record make sense. She writes that the board with her name on it, if it exists, belongs to her. This is the arithmetic of memory as a claim. Carl receives the letter from the Würzburg Restitution Office in February 1950. The paper is cold when he opens it with a knife. It reads, "In the matter of Stern versus S, the office has determined that the property at Hauptstrasse 5 was transferred under duress. Pursuant to Law No. 59, this property is to be restituted to the claimant or heirs. You are summoned to a hearing." He looks at his wife. She is making coffee with a filter of cloth, careful with grounds he has bought with DM and eggs. She looks at him. They both understand the word to be restituted. He goes to Würzburg on 15 March 1950. The tram lines are restored. There is glass in some windows and plywood where glass is missing. He walks past the rebuilt bridge where new brick sits atop old stone. In the restitution office, the waiting room holds a man from Schweinfurt who took a shoemaker's store in 1942 and later used it as a parlor, and a widow from Oxenfurt who says her husband bought a bakery from a Jew who left. The clerk calls Herr S. He walks into a low room. The people at the table are civil, a man in a tweed jacket, a woman with a pen. The woman reads, Law Number N. 59 considers transactions under Aryanization to have been made under duress, regardless of price paid. He says, I paid. She says, payment is noted. He says, I invested. She says, you may apply for compensation from the state for improvements if documented. He says, where will I go? She says, we do not decide that. In an oral history recorded in the 1980s, a restitution clerk remembers those days as hard. She says, they would bring pictures of furniture they had polished. She says, they would say, we did not deport anyone. She says, and on the bundles of paper cross the table. The bank writes to say the mortgage was paid in 1943 in installments. A neighbor writes to say Carl did not behave badly in 1938. The pastor writes to say he believes Carl is a good Christian and did not act from malice. Ruth's lawyer writes to say the law does not care about character, it cares about title. The file receives another signature and a stamp. The hearing is brief. The decision is short. It reads, the property is to be restituted to the claimant in its entirety. The current possessor will vacate within 90 days. Where appropriate, a lease may be negotiated at fair rent for an interim. Carl reads and does a farmer's measurement of time. 90 days is seed to sprout. 3 months is hay in the loft. 90 days is longer than a week and shorter than a season. He asks for a lease. He will pay rent to a woman he has last seen at a table 20 years earlier when she poured him coffee from a grey pot. There is a meeting with a notary in early July 1950. Carl signs a paper that says he will vacate by 31 October. He signs another that lists ploughs and cows and implements. The list is poetry of circumstance: 1 iron plough, worn, 1 wooden hayrake, 2 cows, 1 brown, 1 with white face, 3 pails, 1 bell, 2 pitchforks. He digs the old sign out from behind the planks. He rubs the dust off the letters STERN with his sleeve. He sets it on a table. He looks at the grain of the wood where his own name had replaced it, and years of weather smoothed the edges. The soil keeps no record of owners. The boards do. Ruth does not come. She does not want to see, not yet. A steward for her, an agent comes. He is cool for her, an agent comes. He points to the horizon and asks, "Where are the boundaries?" Carl points at the oak by the ditch, at the stone in the wood, at the place where the rose changed soil color. He shows the land as a man shows a scar. The agent nods and writes. He says, "We will lease for 1 year." Carl nods. He feels relief and humiliation. He feels gratitude threaded with loss. He is a useful man. He will be a tenant on a farm he believed was his. He knows tenants. He used to be one. He can return to that arithmetic. The agent leaves. Carl sits on the stoop and watches dust play in a shaft of light. He writes later, "The soil keeps no record of owners." In his denazification file, an appended note in September 1950 reads, "Subject complied with restitution decision without incident." This is how the state stores virtue, a 4-word phrase in a case file. The village is not kind. A man who hates him says loudly, "They take and take." A woman who once traded sausage with Berta in 1936 whispers, "Perhaps it is just." The Expellee family upstairs watches with their trunk half-packed. They too have to move, because the new owner might not want tenants. The arithmetic of loss compounds. Local newspapers run 2 narratives in alternating columns, one about homes lost in the East, another about homes returned to Jews in the West. In between are advertisements for sewing machines and beer. The advertisements win. The Cold War is becoming cold. The border up by the Rhone, where Carl took cows to pasture as a boy, is now a wire and a strip. It is policed. The East is cementing. The West is becoming West. In a federal republic born in 1949, the government in Bonn prints school books in which the Nazi period is a lesson about a few. Then it is a lesson about bombings and expulsions. The mathematics of memory is political. It is written in sentences that talk about suffering as if it were equal. It is written in German. It omits the rest. Karl and Liesa buy a radio in 1952. It announces that a man named Adenauer is going to America. It announces the Korea War. It announces strikes in the Ruhr. It reads the evening prayer. The radio speaks with a new tone, upright, careful. It is the voice of a state that wants to be normal. It plays Schubert at noon. Karl gets a job 3 days a week in the Oxenfurt city office, in the department called Wiederaufbau, reconstruction. He files forms. He signs certificates of building completion. His new city job sits under the photograph of Theodor Hoss. He knows the arithmetic of this bargain, new jobs for old hands. He sees the men coming back to desks they once left in 1945. They smile and tell jokes in the hallway. They have wives, and their wives bring baked goods to office events. Their wives remember 1945 as hunger, and 1943 as bombings, and 1938 as a year of parades. A Bundesarchiv memorandum written in 1954 refers to the necessity of integrating experienced functionaries into the apparatus of the new state. It is an honest document. It is also an indictment. It says, numbers matter. Streetlights have to be fixed. Trains have to run. Bills have to be paid. The arithmetic of democracy comes with numbers and names recycled from the arithmetic of dictatorship. The men who knew how to add columns in 1936 also know how to add them in 1954. The children go to school with new books that discuss the Wirtschaftswunder. They copy the word into their notebooks. It feels good. It tastes like chocolate and oil. The children's lessons about the war are tidy. Verbrechen der Nazis is a heading. The subsection is short. The longer chapter is about the Berlin airlift and national division. They sing songs about the pine forests and the Danube. They sing songs about the pine forests and the Danube. The teacher, who in 1942 taught them to measure skulls, now teaches them to measure wood for birdhouses. He does this well. He is an earnest man. He is kind to children. He dismisses any questions about Jews with a sentence, "That was a time of criminals." He tells Karl at the market that he has rethought many things, and he means it. In 1955, a stone is set in the town square listing dead of the war, names, dates. The names include Karl's brother. In 1957, a second stone is added. We remember the expulsion. A poem is inscribed. The letters are carved with care. There is no place in that square to say 1939, forced sale. There is no place to list names like Stern. The mathematics of public grief requires a shape that fits the stones and the speeches. In the late 1950s, Karl occasionally passes a Jewish man in Würzburg wearing a hat and a coat that smells slightly like mothballs and camphor. He is a rabbi. He came back from the East. He walks with a stick, slowly. He speaks to a woman in a store. He laughs. Karl watches him for a moment as if to fix the image in his mind. He does not speak. The Spruchkammer files go into boxes. They go to the county record room. Later, they go to a regional archive and wait for a historian. The Wiedergutmachung files continue to move. Cases are delayed, settled, appealed, withdrawn. The land refunds some men for good faith improvements they made to property not theirs. Karl does not apply. He decides that the mathematics of asking for money now is too complicated and too public. He is tired. He keeps his head down. He farms small leasehold strips. He stacks paperwork in the office. He attends mass. He counts the seasons. He learns that his son can be something other than a farmer. One day in 1958, an American film shows in Oxenfurt. It is a documentary about liberation, with camps and corpses. The town watches it with swallowed breath. A man near Karl whispers, "This is exaggerated." Another man says nothing and leaves. The theater is quiet. The projector hums. The sound of clapping at the end is uncertain. An occupation report from 1945 once noted, German civilians taken to Buchenwald report shock and disbelief. Some cry, many look away. The report is written in a way that is meant to record an event. It is not meant to measure the depth of the reaction. You cannot tabulate how deeply disbelief is felt. In his notebook, Karl begins to write sentences he cannot say. He writes about the day in 1939 when im Bar. Stern stood with arms at his side and watched a trusty hand, a key to a man who had eaten at his table. He writes about the morning in 1950, when he set a sign with another man's name on it on a table. He writes about the arithmetic of guilt. Who went to prison, he writes. Who stayed in office? He answers himself. The man who shouted loudly went to prison for a time. The man who signed quietly returned to a desk. The man who acquired quietly paid a fine and then a rent. He writes, I carried potatoes into a Spruchkammer as payment for my share of all that. I carried boards to the stove to burn them. He writes, when someone says exonerated, I hear the word emptied. He does not confess to any law. He does not absolve himself in light. He does not dramatize. He has a farmer's habit of writing the weather first. 9 August 1959, rain. Then the page turns, and he writes a sentence about a triangle of land behind a hedgerow that is heavy with clay and where wheat does not like to grow. Then he writes, the soil keeps no record of owners. He writes, but the soil remembers tools. It remembers a hand pressing a seed into it with the heel and says, that was this man, like this. He thinks of the line he wrote in 1950. He thinks of the people who speak now in the village about bombings and about East German relatives and about NATO. He thinks of what he cannot say in line at the butcher's. He thinks of the agent who came in 1950 and asked him to point to boundaries. He can always point to boundaries. The maps give him power. Nothing else does. The Cold War is a geometry he can understand. 2 blocks, a border that runs near his boyhood summer pasture, a choice of loyalty that is both forced and felt. The church asks him to vote for the Christian Democrats. He does. He likes order. He likes the new houses. He likes that the litter is collected. He does not like the way sentences in newspapers in 1950 avoid telling him why they left in 1941. He saves newspaper clippings. He does not tape them on walls. He stores them between Bible pages. He is a man who stores. In 1960, the county commemorates the 15th anniversary of liberation. The mayor speaks about rubble, about hunger, about American generosity. He uses the word freedom 7 times. He says, we look forward 4 times. He does not use the word Jew. Carl stands in the crowd. He wears his Sunday trousers. He claps when people clap. He goes home and feeds pigs and writes in his notebook. In 1939, I got a farm. In 19